And now I'd like to invite Karen Myers, the director of the AI lab at SRI, up to give us a closing benediction. The floor is yours.
I'm not sure I have that in me. Wasn't trained to give benedictions, but I do have some closing remarks that I'd like to share after that excellent discussion by the panel this evening. So first of all, let me say that SRI is very honored to be here tonight celebrating the accomplishments by Doug and his team on the work they did 50 years ago at our institute just down the road up in Menlo Park. I'm also personally very excited to be here because my own research focuses on the area of AI technologies to enable improved man-machine collaboration. So it's exciting for me to be a part of this event because of the nature of the work that I do. I don't have a nice picture that I can put up on the display of me with Doug Engelbart. I never had the opportunity to meet him, but I do have a personal connection that I can share, which is for 10 years, I was in the office that apparently Doug was in at SRI. So that's kind of my connection to him. So, and I also want to say that I think Doug would be very proud of some of the work that we're continuing to do at SRI in the general area, building computers that can augment human capabilities and able to enable them to solve harder problems and do that more effectively. So I'll just throw out a couple of quick examples. One thing that we're doing is building next generation dialogue systems. So some of you are probably familiar with Siri. Siri came out of our lab at SRI. What we're trying to do, that's kind of a next generation of Siri, is look at building systems where you can have ongoing dialogues with the technology. The technology knows you, it knows about you, it knows the interactions that it's had with you, and as a result of that can help you be much more effective in doing complicated kinds of tasks. In contrast, something like Siri, what you can do is ask it to send an email or put something on your calendar, which is great, but we're trying to think about the next great thing and how we can build the technology to support much more effective interactions with your systems. A second example that I'll throw out is that we're working with some state-of-the-art deep learning technology, a type of technology called GANs, Generative Adversarial Networks. And we're using that in the space of helping human designers think out of the box, think about new ways you can create artifacts that maybe they wouldn't have thought of before because they're sort of bound by their education and their training and what they've been exposed to. These kinds of technologies can kind of hallucinate things, come up with ideas or suggestions that maybe a human wouldn't have thought about because they have their own cultural biases towards doing different kinds of design tasks. So that's just a little bit of an overview of some of the things that we're doing that we like to think would be very much in the spirit of technologies that Doug would think are helping augment human capabilities in interesting ways. I was going to introduce the concept of wicked problems, but Erica Gregory beat me to it and say that the kinds of problems that the panel is talking about today really reminded me of that concept. So in case some of you are maybe not familiar with that, it's a term that coincidentally actually was coined right about 1968. It was by a German researcher. He was a design researcher by the name of Horst Riddle. And he coined this problem to define a class of problems that are so hard, they're so complex and so many interesting factors that are interrelated in very hard to understand ways that they may not even be soluble. So there's a whole body of work that's grown up around this concept of wicked problems and trying to understand how you disentangle them and solve them. And I think tonight we heard some examples of some really important problems in our society in this space and also encouragingly some great approaches to how to address those kinds of problems. The three problems that we're focused on tonight are, in some sense, problems that were derived from our society as a whole, but we in the tech community, unfortunately, I think, are creating some of our own wicked problems that we need to think about solving. And one that's getting a lot of, appropriately so, a lot of attention in the media has to do with job displacement, right? So we're building great automation capabilities, but as a result of that, we've had major loss of jobs in the manufacturing sector and are probably about to see a lot of losses in the transportation sector as well. So we as a community also have to be thinking about what are the consequences of introducing this technology and how can we mitigate the effects on those people who are most impacted by the introduction of that technology. So I wanted to move on then and talk a little bit about this question of optimism versus pessimism. And before having heard the panel, I'd already thought that I was going to come down on the optimistic side, but actually hearing some of the great things that our panelists are involved with has made me even more optimistic. But I did want to share one little personal anecdote of what makes me very optimistic about the future and being able to solve some of these hard problems. So I've got a teenage son. He likes to spend lots of time outdoors. And one day this summer, after he'd come home with yet another sunburn, I gave him the lecture about, you've got to use sunscreen. If you're not doing it, by the time you get to my age, you're going to have skin cancer. So, you really have to do this. And he just looked at me the way teenagers do and shook his head knowingly, and he said, Mom, don't worry about it. My generation is going to cure cancer. And of course I said, I don't care. I still want you using sunscreen. But that's really stuck with me because to me it's so representative of the optimism and the enthusiasm of the younger generation. It's important that they be engaged and excited about solving these problems because they're the real stakeholders that are going to be most impacted by some of the problems we heard about today. They're the ones who are going to have to live with the consequences of not coming up with good solutions to these problems. But I guess I'm very optimistic because, not that my son will cure cancer, but that maybe his generation, people in his cohort will be able to do that. And part of that, I think, stems from the fact that they are motivated, they want to change. A lot of it, too, these kids are digital natives, right? They grew up with technology almost from the day that they were born. They love technology, they're facile with it, and they believe in change. They believe that they can make a difference in the world and that technology is the way to make that happen. So, like I said, I'm optimistic about the future, and I'm very excited to think about, this current generation of youth and all the great things that they are going to do, leveraging the products of some of Doug Engelbart's earlier research, the technology that he was able to generate, and with that technology being able to achieve Doug's larger goal, which was to actually have significant social impact change for the greater good of our society. So thank you very much.